Almost.
Almost. I'll let you know when it's 13. Or you've got your phone. There we are at 18:13.
Good evening, councillors, and welcome to this Finance Committee meeting this evening. I don't see any members. Is there a member of the public here? Oh, Steve, sorry. Right, we're getting straight on with the agenda. Apologies.
Councillor Sam Charleston.
Public question and statement.
None have been received.
Any councillors' questions and statement?
None have been received.
And minutes of the previous meeting.
You have them and they have all been circulated.
Councillors, you're all okay to approve the corrects of the meeting while I sign? I'll sign it just after the meeting. Any declaration of interest?
None have been declared.
Any dispensation?
None have been requested.
Chairman's announcement. So as the chairman's not here, I have nothing to add apart from saying Ramadan Mubarak. I had my food and I'm feeling great. Right, so main agenda of today. Steve, over to you.
Evening, Chair, councillors. So first report this evening is on the budget monitoring. This is to period 9, which is the end of December. Same format as usual. It's a report in 2 halves. Following discussion at the full council, it was decided that the Finance Committee would receive all the results across the whole council, in addition to looking at the cost centres that are relevant to this particular committee. So the section 4 looks primarily at the finance 2 cost centres, which is the finance teams cost centre and the public works loans cost centre. Explains any major variances there, which is there's only the one, which is the irrecoverable VAT, paragraph 4.5 of the report. We've discussed that numerous times. Happy to take any more questions, but basically it's because we did a voluntary declaration last year. We put £99,000 through last year's books to show what our estimate of the liability would be for VAT for last year. The reversal of that goes through this year, and then it gets matched with an invoice from HMRC. We've yet to receive the invoice, which is why it still appears as a variance in the budget monitoring in the usual accounting way. In an ideal world, it would have been matched much earlier in the year, but it's taken this long in order to provide proper estimates to HMRC. We've now had one meeting with HMRC, and they've given me some homework to do. I'm providing that by the 5th of March, and I'm hopeful that in March we'll get a final verdict from HMRC in terms of our liability. So I'll be able to update you at the next meeting about that. But in terms of the budget variance, we've explained that before. Happy to take any further questions. Apart from that, the finance 2 cost centres that are the responsibility of this committee are looking fairly healthy, and they're set out in Appendix A. If you wanted to quickly look at Appendix A, just a reminder that in the variance column on the right-hand side of the table of figures, as per all of our budget monitoring reports, red bracketed is usually good news. It's either a sign that there's an underspend of expenditure or an overachievement of income, whereas black solid figures are usually bad news. It's either an overspend or it's expenditure. So as you can see, both the costs in that cost centre, the FIN cost centre, the finance cost centre, if we scroll down, bottom right is a very healthy 109,000. And that's if you look up a few lines, you can see irrecoverable VAT, the 99,150 variance is the principal explanation for the bottom line 109. So if you disregard that, we're still looking at a net underspend for that cost centre, which is obviously good news at this time, at the end of December. And then if we scroll down to the other table, the public works loans cost centre, this cost centre purely looks at the various loans we've taken out in the past. And as you can see, it's very easy to profile the budget. You can see the profile budget column is pretty much equal to the actual expenditure, because the government tells us every year exactly how much they're going to take out when. So it's very easy to profile it, and therefore you wouldn't expect a big variance. But we've made all of our loan repayments like you've done in all previous years, so that's not a problem area either. So that's the first half of the report, which just looks at the two finance cost centres. And then, as I say, because full council and yourselves agreed that finance committee should look at the overall council position, primarily because full council agendas are so chock-a-block, it might not have the time to fully consider the overall council position. The finance committee has taken that into its terms of reference as well. So Appendix B sets out the full council position. So this lists every single cost centre by department. And you can see that, again, looking to the right-hand side and looking at the variance column, is mostly full of red bracketed figures, meaning underspends or overachievements in those cost centres, giving a whole council bottom line figure of £867,000 net underspend. Underspends are always better than overspends. However, you ideally, I imagine, would like to see a much smaller number to demonstrate that officers and budget holders have got grip of the council's cost centres and services. 867 is a lot bigger underspend than we'd like to have. However, if you have to choose between a big underspend or a big overspend, this clearly is much more healthy. This is why at the full council meeting in last month for your budget setting for 26-27 deliberations, the chief exec and I declared that we were confident we would achieve at least a £400,000 underspend by the end of this year. Clearly that looks like we're going to overachieve that even. However, we need to bear in mind the fact that HMRC needs to give us their final verdict on how much the VAT liability is going to be. We've already declared 205,000, but that's only based on 1 year. We've got to go back 4 years. It's not quite as simple as multiplying 205 by 4, but that it's probably going to be £300,000 to £400,000. That will then cause a big pressure on outturning this year after paying off the VAT liability and still achieving a net £400,000 underspend, even after we've paid off HMRC. But that's what the chief exec and I have gone on record as advising you, and that's what's built into your budget for next year. So that's still what the senior management team, Asa and I, are still trying to achieve, is to make sure that we economise as much as possible in the last couple of months of the year. And if we can keep on this trajectory, then we should be able to achieve what we estimated, the 400,000, and settle all of the historic VAT liabilities that are still outstanding. So that would be a huge achievement, but I have to say there is a risk that will come in under 400,000. With the general reserve that you've got, 1.8 million, you know, that you've still got the capacity to absorb a net hit, a net overspend at the end of this year, or a less than £400,000 underspend as predicted. However, I know that ideally you wouldn't want to take money from reserves. You'd rather be putting money back into reserves. So we'll keep you updated and you'll get the outturn position at the end of March, and that will give you absolutely unambiguous results for the year and see whether or not we've managed to achieve both settlement of the VAT liability and a 400k net underspend. But as I say, at the moment, that's looking very healthy and looks as though we can achieve, you know, both objectives. The report sets out in section 6 all of the other major variances across the council. So we're looking beyond the finance department. We're now looking across the whole council. The financial regulations require explanations of any variance over £50,000. They're set out in section 6. Each of the heads of service responsible for those various variances have provided those explanations. I'm happy to take any general questions, but if there's anything more detailed, I might need to take that away and come back to you later. And I think I've already covered the sort of main section of the report, which is paragraph section 8, year-end forecast. And yeah, I've summarised that for you. Happy to take any other questions.
Mr. Rogers.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Steve, you keep reminding us that we've got this VAT repayment, and I understand that. You're telling us we've got this debt to pay back. The thing I want to concentrate on is the fact, if you could pass on my thanks to everybody who's played their part in achieving an 860,000 income over expenditure. That is phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal for an authority this size. To be making £1 million profit almost is staggering. I know you're going to say, no, you haven't got that. You've got to take, but that VAT repayment is not going to go on next. So our model that we have in place, our service model, or whether you want to call it a business model, is substantially producing income over expenditure. And that's congratulations to everyone.
Thank you. Yes.
Thanks very much. Steve, I had a question because we keep planning that we really want to come in at this 400k underspend. Is that so important because that's what we budgeted to do? In other words, do we need, because we basically over budgeted what we thought we'd have? I mean, we baked in a projected underspend.
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
and the chief exec and I don't want to be found wanting in terms of the accuracy of our predictions. We want you to have confidence in us, so that's why we're determined to achieve the 400k. In purely financial terms, the council is not desperate to achieve the 400,000. You have baked it into your next year's 26-27 budget and medium-term financial plan, but general reserves have been replenished to such an extent that even if we don't achieve the 400,000, there is plenty of money in general reserves. Obviously, there's a limit, but we can't imagine, now we've declared the VAT liability, at this moment in time, we can't imagine any other unpredicted risk that could come in at that sort of magnitude that would affect us. So even if we didn't achieve the 400 and we ended up this year absolutely, on budget with no underspend, your general reserve is sufficient to be able to weather that over the coming years.
Sven.
Chair, thank you. Couple of observations and a couple of questions, if I may, Steve. Firstly, Ricky, fantastic income over expenditures, looking good until you add in £6 million worth of tax that we charge our residents. Then it's not quite so good. I look forward to the day when council tax is zero and we're generating a surplus in income over expenditure. That would be really useful for me. VAT is the biggest risk at the moment, I'm assuming, on the books, so rightly demands as much attention as we can give it. Going back through some of I'm quite happy with all of that. Report's great, understand the ups and downs, there are variances, stuff goes up, stuff goes down, that's fine. Poultry costs, there was a number in there for £24,000. Is that what we've so far paid in fees to the various people who've decided they need to be involved in the poultry cost project? That's my first question.
Yep, that's my understanding. So that's Appendix C for everybody else. We created a cost centre purely for poultry costs, so Z45, and as Councillor Hockin said, it's £24,000 spent to date. That's no hard construction or repair works, that is professional fees and preparation work.
Okay, so just to make the point, we spent £25,000, the hoardings have been up for 6 months, and we actually haven't done anything physical on the site yet. So I'm just watching the costs for fees and charges escalate, but I would like to see some work on the ground. Reserve levels. So apologies, Steve, if I thought earlier I'd have written to you and asked for this meeting. I would still like to see forecasts of our reserves presented at this meeting on a whatever it is quarterly basis or however often we do them, just so that we don't get to the end of the year and go, oh my gosh, what happened there then? Yeah, so I think I'd quite like to see at every finance committee, we just have this is what they are at the moment. And I know you can't do that to the nearest pound or penny, but even if it was to the nearest, I don't know, 25 grand, 50 grand or whatever, that would be useful to know what the status of the reserves are, just so there's no shocks at the end of the financial year. And I think my last point would be on finance generally. Our business manager in his job description, pretty high at the top of that, was a business plan for the Guildhall markets and his area of service. Matt's been with us a year now. I know he's had some other stuff to contend with, but I think it's time now that we saw that plan. So if I could make an ask that in the minutes that we start making inroads into that, please, because that's something that I would like to see. Other than that, Steve, great stuff. Great job. Thank you very much. Did an excellent job.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Sadat, you want to say something? Oh, okay. Councillor Last. You were first, but
As ever, Steve, it's very difficult to find too many holes in your budget, or in those figures, which is a bit of a shame, but never mind. First of all, I'm very pleased that we are providing services, and whatever a previous councillor has said, to provide those services, we do need income. And it is better to provide increased services for people who need them, rather than saying we have to cut our income. And our plans as an administration is that we improve the services over the next 3 years. And in the end, we come to a balanced budget without having to increase the council tax. But what I want to be sure of, that next year, 26-27, that the planned budget actually comes in as planned. It means then that the officers have appropriately advised us poor, miserable councillors who have limited financial knowledge, that our officers have accurately detailed the costs that are going to be faced. To me, an excessively amount of income or non-expenditure means there has been poor planning. I'm sorry to say that, but that is how I see it. The question I have, and this is my ignorance, I see that there are 2 entries for under finance and facilities for artist work and consultancy or whatever, under the reference 45017, or the expenditure code 45017, for £85,000 for artist work. It seems excessive. Am I not reading this correctly? Does it include something other than pretty pictures somewhere?
Yeah, so apologies that wasn't explained better. So we've got one expenditure account, 45017, that the full name of it is hire of consultant, professional or artist. And of those 3, the vast majority get spent on consultants like architects, quantity surveyors, other forms of professional advice like on structural surveys, statutory inspections that we need to take place each year, and to a much lower extent, some artist work. So we just lumped it all in one. Apologies that you focus purely on the artists, because we don't spend a lot of money on artists.
Thank you. I thought I'd get my wife to contract to the authority, but so thank you very much.
thank you, Councillor Bayliss.
Thank you, Chair. Excellent report, Steve. As you say, it's far better to be over in the red than over in the black. Obviously, there's been a significant change in culture within this council as far as the way finances are managed, and with any change like that, it's going to take a while for people to get the right feel. Ultimately, I think it will come down and there will be hopefully a surplus, but not as big a surplus as there currently is. Just to come back on my colleague to the right, I believe the scaffolding around the poultry cross is actually owned by the council. It's not leased, so there's no ongoing lease fee for that.
Oh, great.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Sadat.
Yeah, thank you. I echo the fact that we seem to be improving over time, and yourself have done a great job in improving our finances and our accounting. Equally, I echo being able to see the reserves over time, which will help us with forward thinking. And equally, I think the progress we are likely to make, and I know you're pushing for it in terms of tightening up our forecasting. I don't think perfection in forecasting will ever be achievable because real world events, I know we are not in control of everything. So I don't think you can plan every single case of real world events. But I think we're all agreeing that having such a large variance is probably still partly symptomatic to our planning isn't quite yet good enough. But as I say, I'm sure we'll make progress. I think what also I would like to see, which echoes or comes out of what we mentioned at the annual planning round, is the fact that we have council staff working on business cases, and we're going to see business cases coming down the pipeline. Hopefully you could perhaps give me just some good news that some ideas are being formulated around which ones to develop, and that may come forward this year, because undoubtedly, I think part of our next stage of improving our financial planning is to have those cooking and coming forward at regular intervals, particularly in the early half of the year, so we don't just get presented line items of bids and savings right at the end. So do we have anything down the pipeline?
I can give you a general answer, sorry, councillor, but the message has been received and understood by officers from councillors saying that the business cases and the good ideas should come to you during the year, and then the budget reflects that, as opposed to at the moment, for the last 2 years, some of these good, odd ideas only appear for the first time at the budget setting time, and then it's a question of catching up. I mean, you're being asked to make decisions on potentially major investment amounts of money without the business case. So it has been the wrong way round, and the message has been received that you want to see the business cases, and then the budget that follows should then either include them because you've agreed them in principle, or it doesn't include them because you've rejected the business cases. So one of the examples was a councillor idea, I think, which is batteries, electricity storage in all of our premises that have got solar panels, and therefore a way of saving on our electrical costs, as well as risk management in terms of a power cut or whatever. So that, I think Mark Reed would be working on, following instruction from councillors to say take that into account as part of next year's capital programming. I'm sure there are others, but we'll bring them forward in due course. Myself, and you'll see when we get to the next report on replacement of a finance system, that's something that's well overdue, but clearly, rather than just agree to buy a new one, we should be bringing a business case with pros and cons so that you can make an informed judgment as to yes or no whether you think it will be worthwhile, rather than just adding an amount of money in the budget in January and then hoping that all goes well. So there's two ideas, but I'm sure there's many more that other heads of service are working on.
Okay, yep.
So that's good news. I just think it would be nice if maybe, if not for next month, but the month after, we could probably have a pipeline of things that are being considered, so we know what's coming down the pipe.
Thank you, Steve. I echo what all the councillors said, but obviously the elephant on the room is the 205,000, the VAT. Can you just explain for how long it's been accumulated? Because my fear is, you say 400, what is it likely if they're going to do it times by 4? What even if it's 600?
So there are two aspects to the what the council's been doing wrong for several years. I will answer how long it goes back. There's an error we've been making on the output VAT, which is regarding income. So when we've been invoicing our customers, whether we've put VAT on the invoice or not, and whether we've been accounting for that, obviously, ideally, we'd have been doing that absolutely perfectly up to now, but we haven't. So historically, for example, our car parking income, which is collected from one car park, Lush House Car Park in Salisbury, is collected by Wiltshire Council, who also do the enforcement of that car park. They empty the cash machines, they pay the money over to us. Historically, it goes back years, it goes back more than 2 years. I'd like to tell the HMRC it doesn't go back any further than 4 years. It goes back some years. We've been receiving the income from Wiltshire Council. They haven't been accounting for our VAT on our behalf, which they could do under an agency agreement, but they haven't been. So they've been paying the gross amount of income over to us. And what we should be doing is estimating how much of that is the VAT, the 20%, how much is our net income. We keep the net income, we record the VAT element in our quarterly VAT return, and then that's part of the settlement each quarter in terms of whether we owe the HMRC or HMRC owes us. We've not been accounting for it correctly. We've been banking and accounting for all of that income gross without declaring the VAT element. So we need to go back 4 years and quantify how much that equates to. And we've done the voluntary declaration. We've told HMRC, we know we haven't been accounting for it correctly. We owe you some money, and they've asked us to go back 4 years and quantify how much that's going to be. Of the 205,000 in 24-25 that I've declared, about £75,000 of that 205 relates to income and car parking. By finding the car parking error, I also noticed that car parking is the majority of the income that hasn't been declared, but there's some other forms of income that hasn't been declared either. And the reason for it all is a very simple, embarrassingly simple reason, but it's because we've been using a not applicable NA VAT code in our finance system. And if you use that code, the system allows you to just push it to one side and doesn't include any of those numbers in the quarterly VAT return. It would have been spotted at any point in time if we'd just done a simple reconciliation at the end of a quarter or at the end of the year of how much income went through the books of the ledger, how much have we declared on the VAT return. I've done that reconciliation now, and it clearly indicates that it was a massive discrepancy, and we should have spotted it way before now, 4 years ago, 3 years ago, 2 years ago, whatever. So that's one element of it. That's the car park income and some other minor forms of income that also should have been VATable, and we should have declared those. So that's one element. The other element is on the expenditure side. So this is where there's HMRC rules about what standard rate. The default is that every supply of services that we deliver to people is standard rated unless HMRC has said there's a different rule that applies. So you'll all be aware, I imagine, on the basic foodstuffs are 0 rated. There's other elements that are outside the scope, like the receipt of the precept from Wiltshire Council. There's no VAT consequence on that. It's deemed to be outside the scope of that. But you've got this other category called exempt for VAT. And it looks the same as 0 rated or outside the scope. All three of those categories have got no VAT on them at all. However, the way you treat them and the way you treat other costs associated with those activities varies. So VAT exempt is a group of activities that if any organisation provides them, the government is saying they're VAT exempt. You're not allowed to add VAT to your invoices to your customers. That's the easy bit. We've been doing that perfectly okay. So, for example, the crematorium, anything to do with death is VAT exempt, and therefore we are not allowed to add VAT to our invoices to funeral directors or direct to the department. We don't. So we've not been breaching that rule. However, any activity that's VAT exempt, the expenditure that you incur to deliver that service, you're not allowed to reclaim the VAT on. And that's the bit we've been doing wrong. So of that 205,000, if 75,000 of that error is due to car park income, the other 130,000 roughly is due to reclaiming VAT on expenditure relating to VAT exempt activities like crematorium, cemeteries, land rental, leased properties, market, square, pitch fees. All of that is another area that we've been doing wrong, and I need to go back 4 years for the HMRC to quantify what that is.
So the point is 205,000 you calculated for 24-25. You think that is the mistake will cover. So now if the VAT is asking us to go back another 3 years, so that's where my worry is, because if it's 205,000 just alone 24-25, then 21, 22, 22, 23 is bound to be either similar figure or a little bit less, given COVID and things like that. That's what my worry is. My worry is also is like we don't end up in the front page of Salisbury City Council's taken to court or being bankrupt because of the not paying the VAT. How's that going to look?
So I want to get to the precise figure rather than give you generalizations, but there is some good news. So it's not 4 times 205. I know that for a fact. That the car park income definitely goes back 4 years. So it's going to be 4 times 75,000 roughly. I think that's definite. On the expenditure side, though, the good news is I did declare 22, 23 and 23, 24 over a year ago. So you might remember this is the second of the voluntary declarations I've made. The first one was over £100,000. That related purely to the crematorium expenditure, input VAT. So that's the lion's share of the 205,000. If 130,000 of that relates to input VAT, this VAT exempt mistake, then of that 130, the lion's share of that is crematorium. And the good news is I already declared that for 23 and paid for 23, 24 and 22, 23 previously. So that's been settled. The 24, 25 element I've declared as part of the 205,000. So what that leaves is 21, 22 for all potential VAT exempt activities and a bit of 22, 23 that isn't the crematorium, it might be markets. So there's a lot to take in here, and I apologise for how complicated it is, but that's why we're doing this major piece of work. We're going back through every single transaction for 4 years, and I have to provide this to HMRC and recategorise things correctly to show what should have gone on the quarterly VAT returns in each of those 4 years, and they'll compare that to what we did declare, and then they'll calculate and agree with us what the net cost is. In shortcut language, it's not going to be 4 times 205. We've declared most of it for 3 years, and the good news is on the expenditure side, this error seems to have started when my predecessor, the permanent RFO, left 2.5 years ago. She used to do all of the coding of invoices and the accounting. The 2 finance assistants that I have still working for me, although they do the invoices now, they didn't do it back then. The RFO, I think, did things pretty properly on the expenditure for what I've seen. I've done some initial check-in. And so it looks like perhaps that's not such a bigger problem for years 1 and 2. It became a big problem in year 3 and 4 when the RFO left. Again, it reiterates the need for a continuity of RFO. But if you remember, 2.5 years ago, there was a period of about 7 months where there were some temporary RFOs, but there wasn't an RFO in. The 2 finance assistants, therefore, thrown in at the deep end with no RFO, suddenly had to quickly do work that they weren't trained to do. So I wouldn't criticise them for getting the VAT wrong, because VAT is complicated for even RFOs. But I think the problem started much more recently on that side, whereas the car park income started much earlier.
That's fine. You have been warning us for quite a long time. So hopefully 400,000 doesn't exceed 400,000 or we're in trouble. Also, can I just bring to your attention about this dilapidation? So are you saying there was a large sum of 150,000, but luckily we should be okay by paying just 26,000, or have I got that wrong?
You do pick the complicated ones, don't you, Chair? So the 150,000 is separate to the 26,000, but they're both relating to the same thing. So when the council bought a new site for its new depot and vacated the old depot site at Harnham, it had 2 units there. The really big unit was used by environmental. The small unit was used by what's now the business operations department. When we left, no allowance had been made for dilapidation costs. So the lease was running down. Once again, I can't believe officers didn't realise 36 months away, 24 months away, 12 months away, but nothing was budgeted for the likely cost of restoring the condition of a rented depot back to how it was when we first moved into it. It's a normal part of leasing property, as I'm sure most councillors are aware. We should have realised that we were going to leave the depot and the owner was probably going to say it's in a worse condition than when I gave it to you. We should have been either prepared to do all the dilapidation repairs ourselves at our cost, or have a sinking fund of money to give to the landlord when the landlord quantified how much it would cost to repair. We didn't do either of those things. And therefore, we suddenly, with only 2 or 3 months to go before the end of the lease, tried to do as many repairs as we could. And I think the environmental department should be congratulated in trying to do as much as it could. However, when we vacated, there was still a difference of opinion between the landlord saying there was at least £300,000 worth of repairs needed, and our own QSs who said, no, we've repaired everything we needed to do. There's a zero liability. And from an accounting point of view, at the year end, so the lease ended on the last day of February, I think it was, and the end of March is the end of the financial year. So I had to, from an accounting perspective, estimate what any contingent liabilities were. That's an accounting rule. Otherwise, we could just pretend we don't know and make the books look healthier. So in consultation with Mark Reed, the head of environmental services, I had to try and estimate what do we think we're going to have to pay out when the two sets of QSs finish arguing and it's all settled either in a court of law or outside the court in terms of an amicable agreement. And all we could rely on is that the smaller unit was resolved much quicker than the larger unit. And in the end, we settled at about 50% of what the landlord estimated the cost to be. So the 26,000 is a real number. It's the real cost that this council will pay the landlord when he invoices us for the cost of restoring the smaller unit to the condition it was in when we first leased it. Based on that 50%, and the fact that our QSs were saying for the larger unit, there was nothing more to do, zero cost, and their QS is saying £300,000, we settled on 50%. It wasn't that difficult. So 150,000 was our best estimate of what it would cost this council to resolve this legal dispute between us and the landlord. During this last 12 months, so I had to put in an accrual for £150,000. Effectively, it's without being invoiced, putting through a cost in the year in question to say, although we haven't been invoiced, although we haven't settled it, I have to recognise that it's potentially a £150,000 cost, a creditor to the council. So that's what the 150k was. The reversal of an accrual goes through in the following year to make sure that when an invoice comes in for the 150k, it gets matched with the reversal so that in the new year, there's no net impact. Because otherwise you'd be putting £150,000 through 2 years when there's only one lot of 150,000. So it's an accounting adjustment. It normally works absolutely fine, and you get a pat on the back for saying, well done for estimating it accurately. In this instance, though, we estimated £150,000 liability, and actually the landlord was able to sell the site without resolving this dispute, but content to let the dispute just disappear. So I accrued £150,000 in the previous year, when actually, with hindsight, if I had a time machine, I would delete that accrual because it was unnecessary. So we've been carrying all year the reversal of that 150,000 unnecessarily, but unfortunately, because we put through 150k excess cost, we now realise was excess, we have to outturn this year with £150,000 underspend in order to balance it over the 2 years. So it's where accountancy tries to be prudent, but sometimes is too prudent. So if I just not bothered, we'd be in a much better position now, only on paper. I mean, there's been no transaction as such. The 26,000, though, we will pay out, and that will be settled, but that will reverse that £26,000 accrual. That worked perfect. The 150k, though, because of some good fortune, has never actually cost this council any money.
Excellent. It's better to be safe than sorry. So, well done, you. Anyone else, councillors, before we go to the next one? Okay. So next, again, over to you, Steve. Yeah.
You just need to approve the
Okay. Yeah, we need to recommend, yeah.
You just need-
Yeah, just noting the report, yeah.
I just
Yes, go on. Over
just prompted.
Are we okay, councillors, to note the report? Noted. Thank you.
Next report, Chair.
Yeah.
So this is the, under our financial regulations, every audit report, whether it's internal auditors or external auditors, needs to be reported to all councillors. In the past, it's always gone to full council. At full council, once again, I think full council was happy that Finance Committee chew over every one of these audit reports and make any recommendations onto full council. make sure that this gets a good airing and consideration, even if full council agenda is too busy to perhaps look at it in detail. So as you can see, the unexpurgated internal audit report, the most recent one, dated January, is in the appendix. So that's the whole of the internal auditor's report. A lot of it sets out what the audit check was, and then tells you what the findings are, and then tells you if there's any recommendations. So to make it a little bit more manageable, so you can jump straight to the bad news or the recommendations. That's both at the very end of the internal auditor's report, but also to help you, I've also distilled all of those recommendations into the table of Appendix A. So Appendix A is something we've produced, whereas Appendix B is the full audit report. But you should see there's a one-to-one match for all of the recommendations the auditor makes. So in terms of Appendix A, the left-hand side is what the auditor's findings are and recommendations, and the right-hand side is the officer comments, which is mostly the RFO, as myself, but you'll see there are some that go across onto corporate governance areas, because the auditor's got a remit to look at not just the financial accounts, but to look at the governance arrangements of the council. So there's a couple of grade ones there in Appendix A to do with statutory office forms and committee minutes, which, if you're a bit confused as to why they're not financy, it's because the auditor's got that more wider remit. I would bring your attention to paragraph 3.2, the shaded bit in the box. That's the headline good news, but we're not complacent, as you can see from the, so that's a really good success story, but you've seen this before, so you should only get credit once, not half a dozen times. But it is a big turnaround from the 2.5 years ago, when the auditor quite rightly pointed out that without an RFO and with 2 finance officers keeping the council going, but guessing half the time, there were lots of weaknesses. So we've turned that around, but as you can see in both Appendix A and B, in terms of the numbers of recommendations, there's a lot of areas that the auditor still feels that we could improve upon, and I would agree with them. And you can see the comments that I've made on the right-hand side, and I think I'll leave it there and take any questions you may have.
I'm sure councillors has read all the 19 pages with every wording, so if anyone has any question? Yes, Sven.
Chair, thank you, Steve. I'm sure all auditors and accountants that I've been involved with have always said, Hocking, you're carrying too much stock. So there's always something that they'll find out. Just a couple of things going through some of the points. So we talk about legacy EDMS and finance systems. Now, I know we bunked those into not next year, the year after's budget. Given that we've managed to go, actually, we might need another £400,000 for VAT, but that's okay in this financial year's budget. We've got that covered. We can make that no problem at all. Is there any scope for finding the monies to do these 2 systems within next year's budget as well? Because from what I recall, they weren't that expensive, but there was it capacity within the organisation that was the holding factor? Is there any chance that now we've solved all the VAT problems and accounts can go back to doing accounting stuff and HR can go back to doing HR stuff? Is there any chance that we could pull these 2 forward? Because I am sure that would be an enormous benefit internally to the organisation and take a lot of pressure off the staff involved.
Yeah, so it's not a question of money, because the business case for the new finance system, and particularly the purchase ordering system, which is what EDMS is. So just a bit of terminology, and it's the first place I've worked where the purchase ordering isn't part of the finance system, which is part of the problems we've had in the past. Anyway, the purchase ordering system is EDMS, and the finance system is called Exchequer. And Exchequer costs over £10,000 a year, and a brand new system that would be 20 times more useful and powerful would cost a fraction of that. So the business case, there'll be we make savings as soon as we implemented a new finance system. The new finance system at a fraction of the cost of £10,000 would include a purchase ordering module, so we could turn off EDMS, and that itself, it's not so much the EDMS, but the support for EDMS, which is a very old, antiquated system, but it's also the pipework, the special local area network that we have to have connecting all of our sites. I think that costs 10 to 20,000 pounds a year in terms of the broadband or whatever it is. So that would make an instant saving as well. So there's a really easy business case that says as soon as we turn off the old two systems and turn on the new system, we'll be saving money as well as having a much better system. The reason why it's been scheduled for year 2 from here is capacity. Now, we could save money and outsource the implementation of a new system. I'm rather arrogantly suggesting to you and to the chief exec that you'd want your RFO to be responsible for implementing a new finance system. I've done it before at other bigger district councils. I've even taken Capita on and beat them legally in order to take the implementation of a finance system off them because they were failing on it and deliver it myself personally. So I'm very confident I can do it, but it is capacity. There's no way for this coming year with VAT and all the other things we're still trying to sort out that I'll have the time to do it. However, if I get over my arrogance and you say it's a high priority, we need to have this in sooner rather than later, and if Steve Bishop hasn't got the time to do it, we can get a consultant in, it would still save us money to do, but we might end up with a system that isn't quite tailored for what we need, because you need to spend weeks and months taking the finance system. It will be full of about 1,000 bells and whistles, and we need to work with the departments and yourselves to work out which bells and whistles do we want. We could get somebody in to do it and just give it to us and say lump it. However, if we're able to do it ourselves, we would have a much better tailored system. So it comes down to, is it worth waiting 2 years and having a really good tailored system, or is it better to get it in sooner rather than later, and we'll just take a fairly generic one that any consultant can implement? And that's a decision at the moment with the chief exec and myself. I've managed to convince him we need to wait. However, finance committee might think, no, it's a higher priority. If Bishop can't do it, we'll get somebody else in that can. It's entirely up to you what you recommend.
Thank you, Councillor Last.
That's pretty, like it's Bishop or out. I get it. I'd like to be able to think that someone, I'd much rather spend 25,000 quid on this than I would on fees to outside agencies for the poultry cost, for instance. And if that meant we could bring in 80% of the system that works and then spend our officers' time on that last 20% tailoring it for us, I'd much rather see us go down that route. But anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Yep. Councillor Last.
My understanding from what you've said, Steve, is that if we do it ourselves, not only do we get it exactly as we want, but in the production of this, the working on this, the staff will understand what they're doing that much more because they've had a hand in its design. And so even so, it will save effort later as well.
Councillor Sadat, yeah. Yeah.
As an ex-consultant myself, there's nothing worse than being a consultant that doesn't have a client that's not integrated and doing it, So, I mean, undoubtedly outsourcing the whole thing, implementation, is undoubtedly exactly the wrong thing to do. But I just wonder whether the halfway house, which is ultimately, that you and the staff, lead the implementation, supported by additional temporary resource, which perhaps isn't, seen as outsourcing, but you're bringing somebody on to help for a year or what have you as an extra temporary, staff member or contractor to help alleviate the burden, where you could, perhaps start a bit earlier or do it a bit faster. Because undoubtedly, I don't almost see it as a binary thing, whereby you do it yourself or you completely outsource it. I mean, that is never the model. The completely outsourcing is never the model. You should get any internal support for an IT implementation. I'll just leave that for your thoughts.
Councillor Bayliss.
Thank you, Chair. In my more than 20 years of delivering IT projects, I learned very, very quickly that the success of any project is more than 50% down to the implementation and integrating the systems adequately with existing systems. And the only way to do that is to work with the customer. So I agree with Councillor Saddard's. I think ultimately you You might get a quick and dirty solution, bringing in external consultants, but without working with your team, you wouldn't get something that is optimal for the council. So I would be inclined to follow your line with wait until the finance team have the capacity to actually get involved in implementation and build something that is bespoke for the council.
Councillor Brown.
I agree with what the last two councillors said entirely. I just wondered, and you will have done this, Steve, is tot up what your own team's time by fully doing it yourself would cost against, the opportunity cost against bringing a part of that capacity in.
I haven't got a number of hours, so it's gut feel at the moment. A business case, a properly quantified, estimated business case would be the ideal solution, and perhaps that's something that you demand that we bring forward in the coming months. But in terms of the different phases, there's the option appraisal stage. So at the moment, there's probably about a dozen systems out there that would work perfectly well. I've implemented Unit 4 Aggresso. It's probably way too big and expensive for this size council, but there's lots of, and then you go down to like Xero and Sage. They've been seen to work at other large town councils as well, and there's everything in between. There's a particular system called Realtas, which I think is the most popular large parish council, town, city council system, which we've never used here. So we'd want to look at that if that's the market leader. But there's the option appraisal stage, which is going out and see what possibilities there are. Then there's the procurement phase, which in the past this council has been very weak at following procurement rules, and we've now got Hampshire County Council procurement team advising us. And they would advise us that this would cross the threshold. We'd have to get quotes. We'd have to do it properly. So there's that phase that usually takes a couple of months. And then there's the implementation phase, which absolutely we shouldn't shorten that. That's where, as I say, it comes out the box with nothing set. And we need to work with the departments more even than the finance team. We'll know what we want. But all finance systems, including the current one that we've had here, have only ever been operated by the finance team. Very much so, I think we need to look at the next system will be decentralised to the department so they can raise their own purchase orders, they can raise their own invoices if necessary. We'll make sure all the controls are in place so they can't run riot with it, but they can self-serve, and it means that they can press a button and do budget monitoring every day of the week if they want to. Whereas at the moment, as you're aware, I know you're as concerned as the heads of service, that it takes me at least 4 weeks to produce a budget monitoring report each month, which is way too late. And then it takes another 4 weeks after that. So sometimes the report is 7 weeks old relating to that particular period. With the new system, it will be real-time budget monitoring, as well as take account of things like purchase order commitments, which we don't do at the moment. So all of that will require the departments, not just finance, but the departments to have the time and capacity to train their budget holders and other officers up. So again, we wouldn't go into this and try and rush it and get it wrong. We'd want the time to do it all properly. And I think the departments themselves, we're looking at probably 50 at least officers who all have to be scheduled in terms of training. That's after the core implementation, and that's after the procurement, and that's after the option appraisal. So I think the work on it will start very soon, but the implementation, unfortunately, is January to March 2028. But even with that long-term time frame, we'll have to start in this coming year, even though there's no budget set aside. We won't be procuring it, but we need to do the option appraisal and work with departments to sort of warm them up for this major change to their everyday routine, as well as the fact that they'll get all the benefits of a new system, but they'll have to have the resources to actually feed the beast, because at the moment it's very finance department intensive, and we're not trying to push the work out, but that's what inevitably is going to happen. And they need to be geared up for that. I don't think there'll be lots of new staff bids or resource bids, but they need the time to work out what does it mean in terms of each of those teams. So again, we'll learn from the past and probably do it properly this time, but that does mean extending the timescales.
So I think Councillor Sven Hocking made a very important point. And if we have an appetite, don't you think we as councillors should propose that in the future, that is brought in-house than externally? If we can save that money, or the similar money that we'll be paying externally, if we can get it in-house, I think that is going to be more. Don't you think it's a rather better idea? But this has to be proposed by councillor, don't we, instead of putting on the pressure to the officer? Yep. Sorry,
May I
Councillor.
respond to that? I think that was the very basis of the question I was asking Steve, because officers' time is not free. So that's why I was saying it's not necessarily, because we do it in house, therefore we've saved 25 grand. We haven't at all. And it might be much more expensive to do everything ourselves. So that's why I was asking Steve whether we've done the sums.
Okay,
And
Councillor
a
Zainab.
mixture's
Yep.
probably the best.
Yeah, I think, again, your language has gone back to binary, in-house versus outsource. And I don't think we should think of it just in those binary terms. I think, you could, as we've mentioned, IT bigger expert than me on my left, but, I've been involved in lots of implementations as well, is, it absolutely needs to be internally led and, massive input internally. You can't get away from that, but equally you can bring extra implementation resource to help. And I think just whilst I kind of got the mic, I just mentioned one other thing. As you mentioned, some early looks at, different kinds of systems. I just recommend the use of AI to help you, look and understand the systems. It would save you massive amount of research time and put your learning up. I'm sure you know some of the systems, but equally AI would help you learn all of them and give you all the pros and cons as to the other ones as to suitability for this particular council.
Yeah, and we say goodbye to Steve and keep AI. Go on, Sven.
Do you know what everybody says? AI fantastic,
Yeah,
AI fantastic. It's going to change. Has anybody watched Terminator? No? To see where it all ends? I think Andrew and Al sort of said a bit more clearly what I was trying to say, I think. So get the sort of system in place to the point we then need to bring our people on board to make it work for us. And if we could pull that forward and get the framework or whatever they call it in place to allow us to do that sooner rather than later, then I'd quite happily support that.
Thank you. Any more councillors? So are we okay to note the recommendation? Show of hands, please. Show of hands. Noted. Thank you. Done. Right. So we come to our end of our meeting. Do we have it? Oh, sorry, Councillor Hawking.
One question indirectly related. Steve, whilst you're still here, did I see us advertising for a finance apprentice again? I say it again.
Yes,
Sorry.
our second finance apprentice.
Right, so it's the second one. It's not that the one we've got is
No, so
finished or leaving.
the first one was a fixed term. They're all going to be fixed term contracts. It was always dependent. The contract was dependent on exam success. And unfortunately, our first finance apprentice wasn't able to pass all of the modules in time for the end of their contract. So we served a month's notice, and now we're looking to recruit another finance apprentice. They were very good work-wise because they do 4 days a week work. They only spend 1 day a week studying. So his workplace experience was impeccable, but unfortunately it was the exams that proved difficult.
Thank you, Spain. Steve, I have to say, it's more red line I have seen for the last 2 years than in the last 10 years, so which is really good. Keep up the good work. Any other matters of urgency? Anybody? Councillors? No? So I call that meeting ends.
Sorry, one of these days I'll put the right name to the right
So-
person.